I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause a view from the spectrum is a better point of view. The question at hand.
Hello, I'm Tally, and welcome back to Autism 30. Today on our podcast, we are speaking with Miss Monique Nelson, a graduate of Peace and Conflict Studies from the University of Toronto. She is the Director of Community Engagement for posAbilities, where she has been working for the past 7 years. posAbility, located in Burnaby, British Columbia, Canada. Their mission is to assist persons with developmental disabilities to lead meaningful and healthy lives by partnering with the community to provide a comprehensive range of person-centered services for individuals and the families who care for them. In her role at posAbilities, she oversees the communication function for the association and is actively involved in supporting families through information sharing, building support networks, and assisting them with navigating the complex bureaucratic service system. She is a mother of 2 children, one of whom has autism, a volunteer resource parent with the Family Support Institute of British Columbia, the director of Income and Storytelling Society of BC, and mentor in the Vancouver Board of Trade's Leaders of Tomorrow initiative. Monique is a consummate collaborator seeking ways to fill gaps in coordinate change maker to support individuals, families, and community groups on their journey through life. Monique also enjoys spending her free time exploring nature and discovering new places and people with whom to build community. Welcome, Monique.
Thank you, Tally. I appreciate being here today.
I'm so happy you're here as well. How did posAbilities get started? Can you tell us a bit about the history?
Absolutely. posAbilities was formed in 1998. At that time, we were known as Mainstream Association for Proactive Community Living, MAPCL. That's quite a mouthful, huh?
Yes, it is.
If you're wondering how we got to that name, it's because we founded on 4 community living organizations, each of whom were pioneers in the service delivery area, following the closure of institutional care for people with developmental disabilities.
Yes.
And these organizations were called the Lower Mainland Community-Based Service Society, the Pacific Association for Community Experience, Proactive Society, Mainstream Society, and then a few years later, Laurel House Society came into the fold. And each one of those organizations was formed to fulfill a specific need. For example, educating children with autism, showing that there could be people with fragile health living in community in a small residential care setting.
Yes.
Life skills training. Those were our roots, and those are the services that we continue to offer today.
And what is the philosophy of posAbility?
We're committed to building and participating in a community where all persons are welcomed and where they're all valued for who they are and the contributions that they make. And our services are guided by a core set of values: person-centeredness, inclusion, learning, and excellence. That describes how we work with our partners in community, our families, and the people we support. And it's a reminder of the heart that's in our work.
Yes, wonderful.
A strong set of values is really important in helping us respond to the changing needs of the people we serve.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we do things like embrace diversity. We believe every person is an equal and valued member of our community.
As do we.
Yes. And we're also constantly focusing on things like innovation, learning, and growth so that we can continue to be excellent service providers and be on top of the very diverse needs of the people we serve, who are each individual.
Which is really important. Now, what is person-centered thinking?
Well, person-centered thinking really centers on the individual's preferences and interests first and foremost. We help them achieve what they want in life. And that's an interesting thing as parents because they don't always match up.
No, that's true.
Especially when you get into adult world. So our goal is to introduce resources and supports that reinforce this person-centered thinking culture within our organization. And we believe that when team members and other stakeholders like family and supporters embrace person-centered thinking, that an individual's quality of life improves and the services become more meaningful because it's about them.
Absolutely. It is about them. Now, what are the benefits to posAbility?
I think the key benefit that we offer is that families don't have to retell their story over and over again. We support people to and through life's big transitions.
Which is great.
Serving people from ages 2 to 82, we have a chance to work through lots of transitions in people's lives.
And that's a long time. And that's really valuable that you don't have to repeat the story. Because I know myself as a parent, it's constant retelling of your story with every single service provider that you do meet.
Yeah, that's right. I'll give you an example. When a youth transitions to adulthood, there are lots of questions that are on an individual and parents' minds. How are they going to find work? Where are they going to live? With whom? How are they going to be financially secure? There's a variety of supports that we can offer to them and their families. It may be some further goal-specific training through a behavior consultant. It can be some exposure to career development for someone as young as 14 years of age. They can start with our Head Start employment camp and social skills training.
Yes.
Or family-to-family networking and advocacy support. We do a lot of that facilitation piece. We introduce families to other families. We provide seed funding to groups like the Vancouver Parents Transition Group and the Family Support Institute in order to help build those support networks, provide some core funding so that there are some staff there to assist.
Which is really essential.
That's right. So it's from a service side, but also a wraparound to support the families.
Now, I mean, it sounds obvious, but what are the benefits to posAbilities?
I think the biggest benefit is that families don't have to retell their story over and over again, and that they can be collaborating with us through an individual's lifespan. So not only do we help them address the issues for their relative or their son or daughter, but we also assist them with facilitating their own transitions as they're aging. For the first time in history, people with developmental disabilities are outliving their parents.
Yes.
And that is a testament to the success of our movement, but it also brings up the question, who's going to love my son and daughter once I'm gone? Not who's going to serve them, who's going to love them?
And I know that's certainly a question that I have, and many like me do have.
Yes.
Which is an important one to think about.
And that's where the building out of personal support networks is so important. And it's a difficult journey for families, many of whom have become socially isolated as carers. Perhaps they've given up their job or they've stopped asking others for support because it's tough to do.
Yes, very true. And I know I have the same. Now, can you tell us about how a person exercises their rights?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very different topic and a fascinating one.
Yes, it is, and I've kind of diverted left on that one, but I feel it's an important one that people really should know about.
Well, our role in assisting people to actualize their rights is to educate and teach them as needed so that they are able to know what their rights are, any risks there may be, safeguards, and how they can be responsible for their choices. So we're teachers, we're coaches, we offer choices, and we respect preferences of the individual. And at the person's request, we can include their family support network or their friends or advocates, but sometimes people make these choices and we support them as the individual. That's always where our services lie. Our first line of support is to the individual, and then we involve families to the extent the individual wishes us to.
Which is great, because that means that asserts also their independence and their own voice.
It does. And sometimes it's challenging for other stakeholders to learn that perhaps their son or daughter does want to make these decisions on their own.
Yes, I can imagine that can be challenging as a mother myself, but I do think it's important what you're doing.
And I think for families to know that when we're supporting an individual, that we also educate them on risks and what community safeguards are. So it's a full spectrum.
Absolutely.
And we believe that there's dignity in risk, and that's how people learn and grow, is from life's experiences and having their own free will and choices to do what they wish to do with their lives.
Very true. Now, can you give us a brief description of the rights of a person with disability in British Columbia and in Canada?
Persons with disabilities have rights enacted in Canadian laws, as do all Canadians, and in international laws, to which Canada is a signatory. Examples include our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Canadian Human Rights Act, and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Further, in Canada, we have specific acts to guarantee employment equity. That's just one example where we have our charter rights, and we also have additional acts and regulations in place to help overcome barriers that people with disabilities may face.
Yes.
Some examples of the rights we have are the access to information in a format that's appropriate to us. For some Canadians, that may mean Braille or American Sign Language, or for people with intellectual disabilities, perhaps it's plain language. We all benefit from that.
Yeah. Yes.
But that's actually a right that we have, is to access information in a format that suits us.
Which is really important.
It is, and I think a lot of people miss that. They don't know that they can request that.
And for our listeners out there, I think that's a really vital piece of information.
We also, in this area, for example, in the Lower Mainland, we sometimes bring in interpreters, as many of the people we serve may not have English as their first language. So there may be language differences as well as cultural differences, where we can invite in supports from organizations like Mosaic, for example, or if a child is in school, a settlement worker, to help families truly understand the services that are available to them and the rights of their child or young adult.
That's fantastic.
Other areas that we all have rights include being able to participate fully in community life, sport, and recreation. We all have a right to an education, though we do have to note that it's not necessarily in a classroom. And that's the subject of a whole other podcast, isn't it, Tally?
Absolutely.
We have the right to access health care, to be able to volunteer, to find employment, and to be treated justly under the law, and to have access to the justice system.
As it should be, in my opinion.
Security of our person, and many, many other rights, as you know, that are spelled out in those legal documents.
And I think it's important for our listeners to know that they do have access to all that information.
That's right.
Now, what ages do you serve?
As I mentioned earlier, we serve children from as young as 2 years old to seniors who are now in their 80s. So I just say for shorthand, 2 to 82. Typically, services can begin for children in terms of early intervention, and that would be through our behavior consultants at Laurel. And then we support individuals as they are youth and
Yes.
transitioning into adulthood, then in adulthood through our services. And we now have many seniors in our care, and we've developed some specialized supports for a seniors population as well.
That's great. Now, what services do you offer them?
We offer 4 streams of support and a few innovation programs as well. We offer community inclusion day programs for adults, a community connecting service, behavior consultation for children, youth, and adults, as well as family, team, and professional trainings, employment services for adults, and youth services such as the specialized employment camps and social skill development, and a variety of home living arrangements.
Now, how do you assist people with community inclusion?
Well, we look for the bridges that connect people based on their interests and passions. In terms of day programs and initiatives, we offer a variety of meaningful and enriching programs in Vancouver, Burnaby, Richmond, and Maple Ridge. And people can choose to participate in one or more programs of interest and are encouraged to explore their community as well. So an example of that might be Alternative Creation Studio. It did start out as a typical social and recreational day program, and over the past 5 years, it has transitioned to an art studio. So we've had a really significant focus on engagement in all of our programs. And the last few years, I'm not sure exactly what was put into the water supply, but something has really changed in how we've been able to tap into the communities. A lot of that is our staff and their interests as well. And now, for example, our studio does things like participate in the East Side Culture Crawl along with hundreds of other artists.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
They have exhibitions at the local community center. They participate in art shows with other agencies or individual artists who've partnered up to do guest workshops. We have open space on Thursday afternoons welcoming in community artists. And each initiative tends to build connections and lead to another. So it's been great, and it's also an opportunity for contribution. A project that I'm thinking of around that is the Bright Lights in Stanley Park. So we were working to benefit the firefighters' funds
and
for
can
children.
You, before you go on, can you explain to our audience what Bright Lights at Stanley Park is?
But Stanley Park is one of our biggest tourist attractions in Vancouver.
Yes.
And the Parks Board invites people to participate in creating the displays so that when people tour the park, they see them. And we painted a number of displays, and we got to be part of that. And one of our artists has a shining for firemen. So fire people, persons, I'm not sure the way to put this. But she had a heck of a time out there. And the contribution piece is really valuable, too, because our folks can give back to community. And we can utilize our resources in our organization to help build those connections. One of the other things that we do is we have some initiatives, and they're newer ways that we're exploring supporting people that are not in a traditional day program or a specialized day program. One of those is called Building Caring Communities.
Okay.
So what it involves is a good measure of community development as well as supporting people we serve. So we're making spaces for people with developmental disability in community where they may not have been before.
Which is great.
So an example of how that service would work is that a community connector would receive funding, for example, from Community Living BC.
Yes.
And a connector would work with an individual to explore their unique interests and talents and to connect them to already existing groups in community and then fade away.
So they tailor the program specifically to that person's interest.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to say it's not even a program. It's developing relationships in community with the support. They wouldn't introduce themselves in community as a support worker.
Yes.
The connector would be, "Hi, I'm Joe. This is my friend Bob.
That's
Bob's interested
very
in board
true.
games." Right? So it's
Absolutely.
a very different approach. It's very organic.
Yes.
Meanwhile, the support worker may also be volunteering to help some of these local groups to do an initiative to create the space.
Oh, that sounds a really nice way of approaching it. That's lovely.
And that's an example of one of what we call our innovations. It's testing out new ways of supporting individuals
Yes.
outside of traditional services, which can be really helpful to folks in transition who may be waiting for specific services,
Yes.
and in general who may be disconnected or falling off the cliff, to use a kind of a negative term, as they leave high school,
Yes.
and needing that little bit of an extra introduction and support to get out into community and start building their adult life.
And it seems like what you offer as well is, I know there seems to be a gap after high school, and you sound like what you do really facilitates a nice transition between high school and immersion into the community in which they live.
That's right, because transition isn't a quick process. It can take several years.
Absolutely. It certainly can. What help is offered to enable people with employment?
That's a great question and a really important piece of transitioning to adulthood, isn't it, Tally?
Absolutely.
We have both a government-funded and a fee-for-service option to access our employment services. And what that means is that families can choose, or an individual can choose to work with us without having to wait for a government referral if they wish to.
Fantastic.
And so what it looks like in our role is to assist job seekers with preparing for, secure, and maintain competitive employment. This means work that is community-based, pays at least the minimum wage, and is scheduled in shifts of 2 hours or more, following the labor code.
Yes.
Again, just like any other employee. And how we do it is we find the job to match the individual. We don't rely on a roster of disability-confident employers, and it's a really successful model.
Great.
Services can be funded by the government through Community Living BC, or, as I said, on a fee-for-service basis, and each job seeker's journey is unique, so we offer a whole menu of supports for them. It can begin with things like employment exploration or career education, job search and placement, assisting with gaining an adapted interview, a working interview format for a person,
Yes.
or assisting them with job coaching and helping them learn the ropes initially and then fading away from the job site.
Yes. Now, this sounds like it's really meaningful work and meaningful to your clients who receive the opportunities that you offer them.
Oh, it is. And one thing parents may not know is when they're coaching their young person is that for
Yes.
individuals to start earning income in high school and making the most of their work experience is an excellent indicator of how well they'll do after high school. So encouraging students to try different work experiences, to discover a little bit about themselves in that way, what they like and don't like, where their strengths are, and where the gaps are, where the teaching can be strengthened or begin.
And that's a really great piece of information for the parents out there listening.
Start early. Start at 14.
Absolutely.
Other things that people may not know, which we feel is really beneficial to our service, is that it's CARF accredited.
What does that mean exactly?
Our services are all CARF accredited, and it means that we're held up to very high standards internationally. And for example, there's about 950 of them that I'm aware of. But when it comes to employment, what a key piece is that the service is delivered over a 3-year time frame. And this is directly linked to a person's ability to maintain employment, or the maintenance piece, over time.
Yes.
So for example, in 3 years, a person may be employed at one or more positions. An employer may encounter some challenges, a change in work, or perhaps an individual wants to try something different. Either an employee or an employer can call back our service, and a specialist will help them work through whatever the challenge is or the next logical step.
That's fantastic. And I know changing employment, even for the typical population, happens often, especially now, current day. So what you're mentioning isn't completely unusual in modern day employment activity.
No. It's rather like teaching a person to fish. If you can find a job over a 3-year period, perhaps exit one, find another one, and you've got that support over time, you're going to be successful.
Very true. Now, how does the home living work?
Well, home living is interesting. How it works, actually, is that if you're an adult with developmental disabilities, your facilitator and an analyst will help you through something called a guide to service allocation. That's going to determine your disability-related support needs, lots of jargon here, folks, as well as a funding level.
Yes.
So if you're relying on government supports, that's going to be an indicator of what your options will be.
Okay.
So currently, a lot of people are getting into something called shared living.
And can you go into what shared living would be?
Shared living is a very organic model of support. It can be an arrangement such as roommates or living with a family or a couple, any kind of family constellation or support system. The interesting piece is that they are contracted care providers.
Okay.
So that's the shared living model. And when the fit is good and it works well, it provides a more natural way to be in community.
Very true.
There's monitoring and oversight for that service as well. That's where we come in, helping to make the match and oversee that this situation's working. Other options include residential care homes. They may be staffed part-time or full-time, depending on the needs of the groups.
Yes.
We have homes of folks who are medically fragile and need a lot of personal care support.
Yes.
As well as homes with individuals who have issues related to aging, such as dementia.
Yes.
Or early onset aging. So they have supports for that, and they tend to be in a staffed residential home because their support needs are greater.
Yes. And what's involved in all of this?
What's involved is working with your facilitator at Community Living BC to create a plan, and then to have you do your research as well. You go out and meet several organizations, and then you let Community Living BC know who your preferred service provider is.
Yes.
And then the referral process begins, and the matches, and so on. It can take time depending on the model, the availability, and provincial budgets. So in addition to residential care homes, on the other end of the spectrum, there are individuals who live well independently in their own homes with some support. So we have an outreach service called the Supported Living Network.
That's nice to hear.
So people may need help with budgeting, banking, medication management, doctor visits, and it provides a service that's really tailored to the unique needs of the person living in their own home to help them maintain their own home and independence.
Yes, and independence is really important for some people who actually have the ability to do that.
That's right.
How large is your organization, and what areas do you serve?
Well, posAbilities is one of the larger community living organizations in the province. We were founded from 4 organizations plus Laurel originally, which is how we ended up being multi-regional. We have well over 500 team members and about 100 contracted home share providers, serving more than 1,200 children, youth, and adults across BC. We currently provide services in all 21 Metro Vancouver communities, including Vancouver, North Shore, Surrey, Delta, Richmond, Burnaby, New Westminster, Tri-Cities, Langley, Maple Ridge, Abbotsford, the Fraser Valley, Hope, the Sunshine Coast, Vancouver Island, and the BC Interior, North and South Okanagan.
That is a large area.
It is, and we encourage people to please contact us to see which of our 4 service streams is available in their home community.
And all of those details will be on the autism30.com webpage.
Perfect. And on our website, too.
Yes. Now, how are your services funded?
Our services are funded primarily by the provincial government, and there are some that are also funded privately. We call them fee-for-service. Government-funded services are subject to determining the eligibility of the individual and what is known as their disability-related support needs. As a community living service provider, we receive referrals for adults who are 19 years of age or older from facilitators who work for this Crown Corporation, Community
Yes.
Living British Columbia. And specific questions about eligibility can be directed to their offices.
Yes.
Referrals for children up to the age of 18 years old are provided by social workers with the Ministry of Children and Family Development, and they also have specific eligibility criteria. And to access those services, you'd contact your local Children and Youth with Special Needs office of the ministry.
Yes.
And that information is all on their website. It outlines across BC all the different offices. And you choose the one closest to you if you don't already have a social worker or, for adults, a facilitator assigned to you.
Yes. Now, how long does the process take?
That's an interesting one. For adults, it's recommended that you contact Community Living BC when your child turns 16 and you begin planning for their transition. At 18 years of age, they're already eligible for the Persons with Disability benefit,
Interesting.
even
yes.
if they're still in high school. And then at 19 is when you're eligible for the government-funded services, such as the ones I've described, like community inclusion or residential living or employment and so forth.
So we really do have to start at the age of 16 applying and being prepared to
That's
access
right.
those services.
And government recommends we actually start preparing at 14 for the transition.
Okay, now that's a piece of information I wasn't aware of, which is really important for our listeners to know.
That's right. And there's quite a lot of information on transition planning on the internet, including a framework for what to consider during each year. So you can break it down into pieces. If you wait until your child or youth is 17 and a half, it's truly overwhelming. It involves a touch with roughly 9 government organizations and corporations to
Wow.
facilitate the transition.
That can be overwhelming.
That can be. So we offer workshops, and there are parent groups who specialize in supporting people through that particular part of the process.
Yes.
And then, as I mentioned, our fee-for-service options can be helpful as well for
Yes.
people who may have put in a request for service, have done their planning, but they may not be receiving any monies just yet. They may have to wait.
Okay.
Can
now,
be the case in either children or adult services.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something about workshops. Now, what types of events do you offer throughout the year, and how can people find out about them and register?
We offer many, many events throughout the year, roughly 30, in the different communities where we work. A highlight for us would be our annual art show, and we host that every year during Community Living Month, and we invite organizations from throughout BC to come and join us in a celebration of art. It's a
That-
big 2-day event.
That sounds great.
That's just one of the big ones. And then because of the nature of our work being so community-based, we may have other types of activities that are in the local neighborhood, like the Eastside Culture Crawl, and our studio will be open for that.
Oh, wonderful.
Or our Stage Door Theater will put on some plays.
Oh, fantastic.
So you can find out about any of those kinds of activities on our website. We have an event calendar, and we also have an electronic newsletter on a monthly basis, which you can subscribe to on our website. So there's lots of ways to connect with us digitally, or of course you can always pick up the phone and give us a call in Burnaby at our head office.
And once again, all of those details will be on our webpage at autism30.com.
So in addition to the arts and cultural events, we typically offer a series of workshops every year on personal and financial planning.
Very important.
So if it's not posAbilities hosting, I would collaborate with other service providers. We just want to continually ensure that that information is available to parents when they need it.
Yes.
So it looks at things on the personal side like building support networks,
Yes.
on the financial side, securing the future through wills, estate, and trust planning, registered disability savings plans. Also, a representation agreement is a critical legal document for a transitioning youth. to have a legal right to represent them as a parent, the individual must indicate that it is you they wish to have continue supporting them.
Yes.
Or other people can be brought in at that point, which is helpful to building their support network as well.
And all of those workshop titles sound absolutely vital that parents and individuals get that information.
They really are. And there's a handy little book called 7 Steps to a Good Life that was produced by PLAN, Lifetime Advocacy Network,
Yes.
which is a group of parents, and it breaks down those topic areas and what the key considerations are, and uses a storytelling format to help convey the information and benefits of taking care of that planning piece.
That sounds great. Now, how do you connect people to communities?
Well, we start by building on their strengths and interests and the resources and relationships that are immediately surrounding them, and then we build from there.
Yes. Now, I know you've worked and you're very passionate about what you do, but what are some of your success stories?
I think the biggest success stories for me are the ones that manifest our mission. Like, we have this big team of people who's working every day to improve people's lives, and then we have a breakthrough moment, either an individual or a team. And one that I'm thinking of is a fellow named John, who now does American Sign Language classes in his own home for people who wish to join it.
Oh, lovely.
So taking something that a person could view as a disability, as a person who's hearing impaired, and having it turned around to him being the lead person and the role model, being the teacher, is one example of the kind of work that we like to do to break down stigma and help people shine.
Oh, and I know this sounds like an obvious question, but what do you love personally about your work?
I love that every day is different and that I get to facilitate hundreds and hundreds of connections each and every year that make a difference in people's lives.
And
I'd like to tell you one more story. Can I, Tally?
Oh, absolutely. I love stories.
Well, the story is about a fellow named Alex, and I met him at the art show. He's with another association, and during that time, we communicated using his iPhone and
Yes.
sign language. And he had told me that he can speak, but when there's some pressure, he has an anxiety and he's not able to necessarily articulate verbally.
Yes.
So we were able to provide supports to him through sign language interpreters at our art show so that he could engage fully with the audience, even at a time where he was feeling a lot of pressure. And it was very, very cool. And what was even, like, that day was just really special for me to be able to communicate with him and support him how he needed to be. And it made me realize what the world would be like if everyone had their support needs met.
Absolutely. And I think what you've mentioned is really important, because I know many people out there don't understand that if a person has autism and they're not necessarily verbally communicating with you, it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't anything going on in their head. And they're very aware of what's being said around them, and they're very cognitively aware of situations. So the story you just said, I think, is a very valuable one to get out there.
But
in
it
the
gets
community.
better. It's not over yet.
I can't wait. Continue, please.
So that was last October when I first met Alex, saw his art, saw him selling his art, had an opportunity to acknowledge him on stage, have him make an acceptance speech for a prize that he won. All of this was good stuff. And then 6 months later, he picks up the phone and calls me. I said, "Hi, Monique, it's Alex."
Oh,
We had a conversation, and he called me to invite me to his TED Talk in Langley, because not only is he an artist, he's a public speaker.
that blows me away.
It blew me away too. And it reminds me of how wonderfully gifted and unique all the individuals are that we work with.
Yes.
And I just wanted to share that with families. I thought that was really inspirational to
It
have
is absolutely inspirational.
different experiences with people at various points of their needs of support, and how we can just layer those supports in to help them be their best every day.
Absolutely. And I think I mean, what you're doing for the people in the community, I mean, the story you just said is a testament to the fabulous work that you do and how far people can come with just a little bit of assistance and a little bit of support. Really facilitates all of these people really reach their own personal goals, and as a society, how we can benefit from the wonderful gifts that are now able to come out and be shared amongst us.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, I know we're speaking about posAbilities, so is there anything about posAbilities that you want our public to know that we haven't yet mentioned?
I think I'd like to mention that we have a senior parent support network.
Yes.
An interesting thing, our parents are typically in their 70s and 80s who join this group, and their sons and daughters are in their 40s and 50s. So I'd really like people to know that when we have a community resource like a parent support network or a workshop, they're welcome to join in if they're interested. I view us as, primarily a government-funded service provider, as wanting to deliver a service to community. It doesn't matter to me if you're attached to another organization.
Oh, that's wonderful information.
Come get the supports that you need. And I'd also like us as a community to start thinking about relevant supports for the next generation. So the senior families tell me, I'm not going to die. They planned, but they don't really want to implement their plans. They just don't want to die. And so I think our next challenge is to help them pass the torch, confidently pass the torch to the next generation of carers.
Absolutely.
So I welcome any carer to come to our support network, whether they're a senior or not, because the topics we cover are truly relevant. It's just that we galvanized around a common experience and stage in life as a family group.
Very true. Now, what would you like the world to know about autism?
For myself and my personal experience, it is to always remain curious and open-minded and to meet people where they're at to help them be their best.
That sounds wonderful, and I couldn't agree more. Now, I want to thank you, Monique, for joining us on our podcast today. I think you've given our audience a lot of great food for thought and a lot of really fantastic information, and the delivery of what you're doing here at posAbilities just sounds extraordinary, and I think it's really important for people that want to access your services, which sound terrific, that they do.
Well, we welcome people to come in at any time. And as I mentioned, when they're going through the planning process, Community Living BC will invite them to go meet with a few service providers. We look forward to those calls and orienting people to what we have to offer and also other community supports that they may not have considered.
Oh, well, thank you. Now, we also want to remind you to subscribe and join our mailing list on our webpage at autism30.com to receive information about upcoming podcasts and information. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, please take a minute to write us a review. Our goal is to help the autism community, and having our podcast better ranked would help us in our endeavors. It also lets me know how I'm doing. We also appreciate all our international listeners, as we are currently now heard in 92 countries. Once again, this is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause the view from the spectrum is a better point of view.